Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Swami Prabhupada Ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Brinda Ki, Granta Raj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Gaur Premanandi. All glory to some of the devotees. All glory to some of the devotees. All glory to some of the devotees. All glory to Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga, and Srila Prabhupada. So we'll begin with some Prabhupada nectar, reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Volume 6, chapter titled The Lame Man and the Blind Man. Srila Prabhupada's health was worsening, as often happened when he traveled extensively. Particularly in New York, his health began to suffer. His itinerary was to continue on to London, Paris, Tehran, Bombay, and enter Hyderabad, where he would conduct the opening ceremony of a new ISKCON temple. Senior devotees entreated him to rest a while before going to England and India. He had spent a very pleasant day at the ISKCON farm in Pennsylvania, and the devotees suggested he go there for 2 or 3 months to rest, recover his health, and write. Every day they would beg him to please stay. When he heard that the GBC members in New York had unanimously recommended he not immediately travel, he said, "All right, I will not travel." But he could not be bound by the GBC, however, only by Krishna. He already had his plane tickets, and he remained set on traveling. On the morning of Srila Prabhupada's departure, a few devotees came to his room to make a last attempt, begging him not to travel. He said nothing, though he was obviously set on leaving. His servants were packing his bags, and everything was ready to go. Nevertheless, even as he left his room and got on the elevator, a few men followed, still suggesting he not go. "Prabhupada, please reconsider," said Rameshwar Swami. Srila Prabhupada had remained jolly so far despite his physical weakness and despite his disciples' pleading, but now his face changed. "Don't travel," one devotee said, and another added, "Just stay, sit down and rest." Prabhupada turned, and his eyes were very deep. More than ever, he seemed not of this material world. "I want the benediction on fighting for Krishna," he said, just like Arjuna. Everyone remained silent, and the important instruction burned into their memories. The elevator opened on the main floor, and hundreds of waiting devotees chanted and cheered as Srila Prabhupada walked to the car. On the way to the airport, the devotees again began talking about how degraded Kali Yuga was. "But you have to go on preaching," Prabhupada advised them. "You have to go and try to save these people." As Srila Prabhupada left America, the devotees knew he would remain with them as long as they followed his instructions. Besides, even if he was leaving them, he would return. He was coming from India to New York, and going back to India, then coming to the West. He was always traveling between East and West, tugging the two cultures together, the lame man and the blind. Like Arjuna, he was fighting, and like Narada Muni, he was always traveling, glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. He would never stop, and those who sincerely followed him would be with him. Srila Prabhupada Ki. That concludes Srila Prabhupada's American pastimes. And then from now, the next chapter is Bombay, January 1977. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Chapter 3, Text 21, chapter titled Questions by Vidura. Are we still on 21, Natabar? Anyone want to confirm that nobody skipped ahead?
I did 19. That's what I think for both of them.
Says on my thing. Says on the thing.
You did 19, so.
And the Kuj Bihari Senior did 20 yesterday?
Yeah.
Okay. Then we're good to go.
Third canto.
Third canto,
chapter.
chapter 1, text 21. Tatrata susrava surid vinasting. Tatrata susrava surid vinasting. Banang yata benu jabani sangshrayam. Banang yata benu jabani sangshrayam. Sangspardaya dagdam atanusochan. Sangspardaya dagdam atanusochan. Sarvasvating pratyagiyaya tushnam. Sarvasvating pratyagiyaya tushnim. Please chant. Tatrata susrava surid vinasting. Vanang yata benu jabani sangshrayam. Sangspardhaya dagdamatanu Sarasvating pratyagiyaya tushning. Tatrata sushrava surid vinasting.
Spardaya dagdamatanu shochan. Saraswatim pratyagiyaya tushnim.
Sarvasvating pratyagiyaya tushnim. Tatrata susrava surid vinasting. Vanang yata benu jabani sangshrayam. Sangspardaya dagdamatanu Saraswatim pratyagiyaya tushnim. Tatrata susrava surid vinasting. Vanang yata benu jabani sangshrayam. Sangspardaya dagdamatanu shochan. Sarasvating pratyagiyaya tushnim. Anyone else want to try? Hari?
Tatrata susrava surid vinasting.
Tatrata susrava surid vinasting.
Vanam yata benu jabani samshrayam.
Sangshrayam.
Samspardhaya dagdamatanu shochan.
Sangspardaya dagdamatanu shochan. Sarasvatim pratyagiyaya tushnim. Ladies. Tatrata susrava surid vinasting. Vanang yata benu jabani sangshrayam. Sangspardaya dagdamatanu shochan. Sarasvatim pratyagiyaya tushnim. Tatra there ata thereafter. Sushrava, heard. Surit, kinsmen. Vinastim, all dead. Vanam, forest. Yata, as much as. Venujavani, fire due to the bamboos. Sangshrayam, friction with one another. Sangsparadaya, by violent passion. Dagdham, burnt. Ata, thus. Anusochan, thinking. The river Saraswati. Pratyak, westward. Iyaya, went. Tusnim, silently. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. At the place of pilgrimage at Prabhas, it came to his knowledge that all his relatives had died due to violent passion. Just as an entire forest burns due to fire produced by the friction of bamboos. After this, he proceeded west, where the river Saraswati flows. Please repeat. At the place of pilgrimage at Prabhas. It came to his knowledge that all his relatives had died due to violent passion. Just as an entire forest burns due to fire produced by the friction of bamboos. After this, he proceeded west, where the river Saraswati flows. Purport. Both the Kauravas and the Yadavas were relatives of Vidura, and Vidura heard of their extinction due to fratricidal war. The comparison of the friction of forest bamboos to that of passionate human societies is appropriate. The whole world is compared to a forest. At any moment, there may be a flare-up of fire in the forest due to friction. No one goes to the forest to set it on fire, but due only to friction between bamboos, fire takes place and burns an entire forest. Similarly, in the greater forest of worldly transaction, the fire of war takes place because of the violent passion of the conditioned souls illusioned by the external energy. Such a worldly fire can be extinguished only by the water of the mercy cloud of saints, just as a forest fire can be extinguished only by rains falling from a cloud. Om Jnana Tamrandasya Gananjana Shakaya Chakshuram Latamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Bangum Langai Tegrim Yat Kripatamaham Bande Shri Gurum Dinatayanam. So this is an interesting analogy that Srila Prabhupada uses. I've only heard him use it one more time in a lecture in Mayapur, where he described on a trip to Nainital. Has anyone ever been to Nainital? No one's been to Nainital? 9 lakes? The Pandavas went there. So it's up in the foothills of the Himalayas. Very beautiful area. So obviously Prabhupada was traveling there. I don't know if it was, at what point in his life this was. But he described a station, there was dense smoke. So Prabhupada asked the station master, why is there smoke? And the station master told Prabhupada that there's a forest fire. Nainital, the hills are all surrounded by wood, as many places in India are denuded of forests for various reasons. But Nainital is filled with forests. But somehow or other there was a forest fire. And Prabhupada said the same thing, that no one goes to the forest simply to set fire. In general, normal people. Of course, there are always some pyromaniacs, people who set fire simply for the thrill of the fire. But this is a very interesting. So the friction of bamboos here is also very appropriate in relationship to the violent passion. It takes significant wind in order to generate that much friction between the bamboos. It's not just a mild breeze. It has to be a continuous blowing. And then there has to be other conditions. The bamboo has to be dry. Can't be green. You could rub green bamboo all day long and not get, even a smidgen of smoke. But if the bamboo is dry, the conditions are correct, not too much humidity, and the wind is blowing for just that right amount of time, then very easily one can imagine, just like in the Boy Scouts when you're taught to make fire by rubbing two sticks in a certain way, using a bow. So in this way, everything is in place specifically, just the right time. And in Kali Yuga, every time is the right time because it is the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. But sometimes more than others. It's like when Prabhupada was there in 1975 when we were discussing the World War III due to the friction between Pakistan and China. At that time, the alliances of the world powers were arranged differently. So Prabhupada opined based on the circumstances at the time that yes, there was a possibility of war. And in the course of the conversation, many things came up. The devotees asked Prabhupada, what should we do? And Prabhupada said, you should go on preaching. And what about if there's a nuclear war? Prabhupada said, just chant Hare Krishna. What can you do? What else can you do? Chant the holy name. Completely unperturbed. Just like this recollection in Leelamrita. Prabhupada, what was his wish? His wish is that, let me be benedicted to fight like Arjuna. That's all. So this is significant that we have this example of someone with the topmost preacher, but with a very strong spirit, fighting spirit, fighting against Maya. Who are we fighting against? We're not fighting against any person or any country or any other ideology, really. I mean, yes, Mayavad, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi, we are fighting against that, but in general, this is all a product of Maya. All these other false religions, Dharma, Projita, Kaitavatra. It's just all cheating. Whatever it is, they can make up something today, something tomorrow. Every day, now they have the green new religion, right? Fanatics. And they treat it just like a religion. So-called nonviolence. Everyone takes these things because they don't know who is God. So they elevate some mundane philosophy. Doesn't matter if it's even vegetarianism. We're not vegetarians. But they have militant vegetarians, and militant vegans, and militant ecologists. But what is the point? It is all misdirected, right? A misdirected civilization. And here we see that inquisitive persons who are sincere, they're immediately brought into contact with a person who can guide them. To Vidura, he goes to the forest not to meet Maitreya, but because he is sincere, the Supreme Personality of Godhead within his heart arranges such a meeting. So this is what we see on a regular basis, how sincere souls come in contact with the Krishna conscious movement. So this is our burden. a burden of love to maintain this institution and all of its variegatedness. And because after all, there's human frailty is a variable. And so one is, how can you say, given the opportunity to direct his energy in a proper way in order to become an instrument in Krishna's hands. This is, Prabhupada's not being falsely brave by saying, I want to be like Arjuna, I want to Benedict. This is his sincere attitude. Of course, it's an example for us, but it is not being done simply as an example for us to show some bravado. Like some other people, they just, by show, they make some, how can you say, false image, just to impress certain people. Prabhupada had no need to impress anyone. This was the genuine personality, completely surrendered to the Supreme Lord, in full realization, something that very difficult to observe in the material world. And anyone who had the opportunity to see Srila Prabhupada, and still, even to hear Srila Prabhupada today, those who are sincere immediately get the same benefit as Srila Prabhupada's personal presence. He reasons ill who tells that Vaishnavas die when thou art living still and sound. A Vaishnav dies to live, and living spreads the holy name around. So we understand these things to a certain extent, and by practicing and implementing what we hear, one gets realization. This is that 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, confidential knowledge. Idam tu te gyatamam pravakshami anasuyave. Gyanam big gyanam sahitam. These things are given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to those who are nearby, non-envious. Non-envious. We see so many envious personalities, and they have no potency. They simply, make some philosophical, flowery presentation in order to impress, foolish persons who are similarly intellectually, pseudo-intellectually inclined. This has nothing to do with devotion. This pursuit of the intricacies of Vedanta and its various ancillary literatures. One can read these till he's dead, and he will not get any benefit. Because he has no sincerity. He's not following the footsteps of the previous acharyas. So this is a product of envy, because they cannot stand here at the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his pastimes, paraphernalia, devotees. These things all seem material to them. They ignore it, actually, and they minimize it. On the one hand, you have the sahajas, who are just sentimentally inclined towards these intimate pastimes, who have no philosophical appreciation, how to understand Krishna's transcendental janma karma chame divyam evam yovete tattvataha. Understand the transcendental nature of Krishna's appearance and disappearance. And then you have these Vedavata ratas, which we never want to be. We never want to be just simply false logicians, studying the Vedas for the sake of some name and fame, posing oneself as a scholar, as an authority. But such things are there, and one has to be cautious. And when he sees these things, he should take note of how one falls into such a trap like this. To try to establish himself as an independent thinker. This is the definition of these munis. They have to have some divergence of thought in order to be considered different or unique, so that they can, write books, make a name for themselves, create a following. These things all go hand in hand, this cheating process. Name and fame. Nadanam, najanam, nasundarim. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very careful about such situations. He would avoid these large crowds. Very difficult when, especially, but it is an example for us not to be enamored by such cheap followers. It's very easy. If someone, you see what happens when you flatter someone. Why does Srila Bhaktisiddhanta say, one who flatters me is my enemy? What does it say, Natabra?
One who has too much bhakti is a thief.
Too much bhakti is a thief, because it's also superficial. Right? These are the extremes. And we understand them. Right? By their mercy, by the mercy of Guru and Krishna, we have access. It's almost like an open book test. When you go to school, you're studying and studying. You've studied, you've stayed awake for 3 nights straight, and you get to the class and the professor says, by the way, this is an open book test. And you go, I just wasted 3 days and 3 nights. But an open book test, everything is right there. We don't have to cram for anything. There's no need to commit to memory just by rote, just by mechanical arrangement. No. That's the second verse, Raja Vidya Raja Guyam Pavitramidam Uttamam. This knowledge is the king of education, the most secret of all secrets. It is the purest knowledge, and because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, it is the perfection of religion. It is everlasting and joyfully performed. So there is nothing artificial about this process. If one is laboring and not getting the taste, then he has to examine what is lacking in his sadhana. He has to be honest. This whole process is one of honesty. It is not a fake it till you make it situation. For some time one can do that. But gradually, without developing the higher taste, he cannot maintain. He has to get that realization. It is not enough to theoretically understand that I am not this material body. That's the beginning. He has to progress. And that progression comes by the grace of Krishna. Sarvasya chaham riddhi sanivishto matakpatir jnanamaponam cha. And Prabhupada said many times, and he's told us in different ways. Sometimes he said, just act in such a way that Krishna can see you. Don't try to see Krishna. Just act in such a way that Krishna sees you. He said this in different ways, but it is the same. He also said that the only ingredient necessary for success in spiritual life is sincerity. Doesn't require book knowledge. Doesn't require some artificial devotion. Like Nathabar mentioned, Ati Bhakti Chor Lakan. Too much devotion indicates a thief. Too much devotion indicates a thief. So one has to be careful. Who is that person? In many ways. Who is there to deceive us? Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur elaborated on that point. He defined the two in Kali Yuga. We have those personalities. Kali Chela. Chela means disciple. And Kali means the age of Kali or the personality of Kali. So Kali Chela means a disciple of Kali, but in the dress of a devotee, in the garb of a devotee, wearing tilak and kunti mala, but not acting according to the Shastra. Ihayasya harayadase. Not acting according to the Hari Bhakti Vilas. And what happens? That person becomes a negative influence, and people become misled. So there are many such Kali Chelas in Kali Yuga. And the other person is that Ati Bhakti Chor Lakan. It's called Dharma Dwaji. Dharma Dwaji, one who waves the flag of Dharma. He's just to pretend, like sometimes you see people who are overly or falsely patriotic. They're not willing to do the real commitment, but they'll gladly wave the flag up until the point where they have to go into battle. They're called, what are they called? Summer soldiers, not winter soldiers.
Oh yeah, fair weather friends.
Fair weather friends. Summer soldier, no problem. As long as the weather is nice, we'll fight. But as soon as the winter comes, run away. So Kali Yuga is always winter, as far as the material atmosphere is concerned. But we also have to learn that. Matlak sparshasta konteya satoshna sukadukada. The non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. One must learn to tolerate them, is the key, without being disturbed. So living in the temple, it's like that. One minute it's winter, freezing cold, next minute it's summer, boiling hot. Sometimes even in the same day, according to the mind. The mind thinks, oh, this is intolerable. So much difficulty. Let me go back to my comfortable material situation. Those are the summer devotees. Come when it's nice, but they can't take the real austerity. The real austerity is austerity of the mind. This is the first austerity, not the austerity of the body. The austerity of the mind. How to control the mind. The mind is flickering, chanchala, here and there. Accepting and rejecting. This is the business of the mind. Accepting and rejecting. Sometimes the same thing. Multiple times. So we have to learn how to distinguish between the mind and the intelligence. Then we can act on a platform of steadiness. Dhiras tatra namuyate. Without being disturbed. All right? Yeah, it is a bit like anything else. It requires practice. That's why the nectar instruction gives us this utsahan nishchaya daryat tat tat karma pravartana. Enthusiasm patience, firm conviction. The first ingredient is always enthusiasm. Right? Because without enthusiasm, one cannot be motivated. You'll hear so many people, the so-called life coaches, who make lots of money, telling people what they should do, when practically speaking, everyone knows what to do. They're just waiting for someone else to tell them for some reason. And so that person, Hari's got it. But the devotees are giving these life lessons free and passing out Srila Prabhupada's books, which contain the science of self-realization, the perfection of life, how one can perfect his life, how one can remain always enthusiastic, always motivated, by pure knowledge, the perfection of religion. And no one else has. Prabhupada repeatedly says, only this society. He doesn't even give any other situation any credit whatsoever. And for that, he's soundly criticized by these other organizations. He says, only this society, this International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And many people say, oh, how can you say that? Oh, this, oh, that. So many people crying. Why? Because actions speak louder than words. And results matter. Phalam parichiyate. You judge a thing by its results. Oh, so many people say things. Oh, show me the results. What has your institute done? Has it distributed, 1 million, 2 million, 10 million Bhagavad Gitas? Has it even printed, 100,000 Bhagavad Gitas? Or 100,000 of anything besides your business card to cheat people in general? Right? So we have a great opportunity here to take part. Prabhupada's giving us, just like that story that Prabhupada Das, now Bhakti Brata, Prabhupada Damodar Dasa, tells Prabhupada, trying to give him a dhoti, saying to join us. And he was running away. He didn't take the opportunity. He almost missed the opportunity. Fortunately, Prabhupada was still on the planet when he came to his senses. And what was keeping him from taking that mercy? Nothing. Insignificant. Attachment to one's material situation. Right? It's like they say, the pauper, he's attached to his penny. It's insignificant. But because it's all he has, he's attached. And so in the material world, all we have is, everything is insignificant, but somehow or other, we're attached to it, sentimentally or otherwise. It has no real value. You see, people keep photographs. It has no real value, but it's the memory. And they become destroyed and distraught when they lose this memory. Their phone gets wiped out with 10 years of photos, my grandchildren, my children, my this, my that. Everything is gone, and they go crazy. They go crazy. So just see the condition, what people are attached to. So if one can simply become attached to Krishna and service to the spiritual master, then he is always properly situated. And this is, in one sense, the easiest aspect to achieve is to place oneself as a particle of dust at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But he has to conquer over that ego. He has to conquer over that false ego. Otherwise, the Bhagavad Gita gives every warning, right? Sarva yonishu konteya. Again, take birth in the material world. Again, and again, and again. Even the warning is right there. And what is the definition? Prabhupada said, first class, second class, third class, and fourth class intelligence. Right? What is first class intelligence? Ekachakra Pran.
Lazy intelligence. Lazy?
No, first class intelligence means to understand things by hearing. This is the analogy probably. Second class intelligence means to understand things by seeing.
Other ones.
Third class intelligence means to understand by experiencing. And fourth class intelligence means even after seeing, hearing, experiencing, one still doesn't understand.
Oh no.
Right? If someone says fire is hot, and you hear it, and you appreciate that point, you don't need to see someone else get burned, and you don't need to get burned yourself. So that's first class intelligence. Many people cannot understand that. They don't know who is their authority. They accept false authority. You see the confusion nowadays with these so-called scientists contradicting each other. Every day contradicting each other. This study says that study says this again change. Prabhupada said, this is science. This is what they consider to be knowledge. It's knowledge one day and nescience the next. So who is the authority? Ultimately, our authority is Krishna. And the Vedas, which are infallible. One has to have the proper teacher. If he cannot understand it himself, then he must know who is that person. He has to know what are the qualities of a realized soul. And for the general mass of people now who come in contact with this movement, and they hear Srila Prabhupada's words in his purports or in his lectures, then they can directly experience who is the authority. Because the potency is there. Why did Prabhupada spend so much time translating these books? What is the point? He said, I am not writing these books. Remember what it says. Sarvasya Chahamrita Sanivisto. These things are coming divinely inspired. It's not ordinary. Ordinary persons cannot appreciate this. One has to be empowered. We've heard it directly from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But still people will not accept that. And they'll minimize, see how again and again they'll minimize. It's very unfortunate for them. And very unfortunate for anyone who listens to them. Milk touched by the lips of a serpent. Be very, very careful. In places like Vrindavan is filled with these persons who are they're looking for cheap followers. People who are vulnerable, who are easily swayed. They are kanishas. They say, oh, your parampara is defective. It's not bona fide. If someone says that, immediately walk away. Immediately walk away. And if they try to restrain you, take action. Don't let them propagate such nonsense. Immediately leave the place. And tell everyone you meet, avoid this situation, avoid these persons, like the plague. They're all over. And let's read the translation again. At the place of pilgrimage at Prabhas, it came to his knowledge that all his relatives had died due to violent passion, just as an entire forest burned due to fire produced by the friction of bamboos. After this, he proceeded west, where the river Saraswati flows. Any questions, comments? how not to start a forest fire. The politicians should all seriously read Srimad Bhagavatam.
If we come in contact or like know of different people that say, for example, like you're saying about like, oh, your parampara is bogus or something like that. I mean, in some circumstances, like if you can argue with them and try to defeat them, that's always better, right? I mean, because in one sense,
If you have the capacity,
yeah, it's like, if you don't defeat them and you try to argue with them,
That's
it's gonna
correct.
damage your faith.
Exactly.
It's gonna damage the faith of everyone around
yes,
you.
yes.
But
You
if
have to have the
leave
capacity.
and you don't say anything, it's probably going to damage your faith less, but it's still going to be like a nagging kind of thing.
Well, two things. What Nathabar is saying, that if you meet a person who challenges your parampara, and you don't, for whatever reason, feel confident in your ability to defeat their accusations, then you have to leave that place. Nectar devotion is clear. You have to leave that place. You can do other things, but in Kali Yuga, the easiest thing is to just walk away. Don't give them an audience. Let them think. Sanatana Goswami did the same thing. He didn't want to respond. What's the point? Someone else can respond, but ultimately you save them and you save yourself, because then they still have a chance. First, they cannot claim victory. But oh, you're a coward. Such persons have no ability to hurt you, but you can hurt yourself by engaging and for whatever reason. So yes, don't engage. They have, in their minds, they cannot change. They've been polluted. It's like one person cannot clean a polluted river. Whatever you do is insignificant. If you can prevent all the effluence which is being dumped in it by one way or another, you may have a chance of cleaning everything downstream. But that takes a great effort, and usually not possible by one person. Any other questions? Hari, no questions?
I was just thinking that in school we learn about forest fires. I just immediately thought of Smokey the Bear. Only you can prevent forest fires. But we learned that forest fires are actually quite healthy for the forest to grow and expand. And in this example of the Pandavas, they just kind of disintegrated themselves, because that's just the will of the Lord. So it might be the healthiest situation for them.
That's a good observation. A forest fire can be healthy. They call controlled burns. If it rages out of control, then it's not healthy. That's the point. But a controlled burn, yes. Clear the undergrowth, promote new growth. Certain things are there. But it is for the experts, not for the neophytes. People who are malicious, who go to set fire, they're just like you have agitators who foment dissent by infiltrating political parties to create violence. And they do it specifically for a particular pre-planned purpose. So we don't want to be compared to such persons. We are not provocateurs. Our mission is to save the conditioned soul. We don't need to employ any psychology, reverse or otherwise. We can bring to their attention how life is short, how life is filled with misery, how real knowledge brings real happiness. So by all means, we should introduce them to the real knowledge. And that is our effort. Not that our 2 or 3 minutes of speaking will have much effect. But if they take a book, it's been compared to the time bomb. It sits patiently waiting for a person to be ready. And then, at that time, it takes effect. Many people have had that practical experience. I've had that experience. I think many others have had that experience. Any other questions, comments? Yes, Ekachakra Pr.
I believe you mentioned that results really matter, and I was wondering, what are some metrics in your own personal life that you can measure to see your results in spirituality, and also as far as the whole temple, what are some of the ways you can measure effective results?
Well, Prabhupada gave his 7 points for the Krishna Consciousness Society, for ISKCON. And of course, one of them is to create a community. So a temple is essentially a community. And that community is part of the overall mission. It is not simply a domicile where one eats and sleeps, but it is like the army maintains a forward operating base in order to be directly interacting with the indigenous community and the, whatever you want to call them, the rebels, the terrorists. So you have to put yourself in between. So we put ourselves in between Maya in the material world as advocates for the spiritual world. We become a portal, an oasis. You come in off the street in the temple and you're in the spiritual world, you're in Vaikuntha. So we have an obligation to maintain that specifically, to fulfill the mission. As far as ourselves are concerned, one has to see the primary test is whether one's senses are controlled. Yan mai tunari griya meri sukam hi tuchtam. One has to be free from attachment to material sex life. As long as he remains attached, then it's to be understood that he is not fully purified. And material sex life doesn't mean simply the physical act. Subtle sex has many categories. And in one sense, the subtle sex is the how can you say, the worse of the two. Because one is, it has an unlimited reservoir from his past material life and from exposure to such degraded consciousness. So he has to constantly be on guard. He has to immediately reject that. Thinking, feeling, and willing. Karmana, manasa, gira. As soon as it comes into the mind, one has to kill it. It's not that it's unavoidable. In the material world, Prabhupada said you cannot become free from the situation, but you have to control it. And that is the test. That is the test. You're losing the taste for material sense gratification. You're gaining the higher taste. So, by all means, keep taking prasadam, keep hearing and chanting, enthusiastically attending. All these things are adding cumulatively to your upliftment. It is not just mechanical. It is not artificial. It is not something imposed by the temple management. Yes, we say that in the temple you must attend these things. Why? Because Srila Prabhupada knew what is the benefit. If simply sleeping and eating, Prabhupada said, then this whole society will be destroyed. In Mayapur he said that. Don't become a hotel for lazies and crazies. Those are his exact words. And he said, all the GBC take care. Because this is the danger. That you're maintaining such a nice building, we have such a nice facility, But it is where we recharge our batteries on a daily basis by going to Mangalarti, by chanting our rounds, by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam and taking prasadam. And then we go out and we fight Maya. It's like we charge our phones every night. We charge our portable speakers. This is the business of a temple, where we can recharge and go out and fight. Otherwise, we don't need a building, technically, The 6 Goswamis lived under a different tree every night. But you see how controlled they were. Cannot artificially imitate. One has to be on that platform. Otherwise, artificially imposing austerities will lead to a hardened heart, where you think that austerity is the end as opposed to devotion. It's no longer just a means, but also the end. So be careful. Austerity is meant to assist you. It is not the end result. Not just see, I can do this, I can do that, or this. No, it's not. One can take, some personal satisfaction to be able to tolerate. That's okay. In this way, when he's confronted, if he can tolerate, that's a good thing. He's not affected by the heat or cold, or by this person or that person. He's tolerant. What is that? Titiksasva Karunaika, 26 qualities of a devotee. First 2, Titiksasva Karuna, tolerance and mercy. Why are they the first 2? Because without tolerance, nothing else is possible. Without tolerance, nothing else is possible. One gets agitated easily by some insignificant thing another person does. Ultimately, it's all insignificant, unless that person is a demon and blaspheming, in which case we discuss. You go away or you take care of business, one or the other. Any other questions or comments? Quick one, back to Joseph.
You said about earlier about making progress is down to just sincerity. So how is it that we understand how to be really genuinely sincere in our dealings, especially when it comes to the devotional acts? Because there's many times where you kind of feel compelled to act in a particular way because it's good for your spiritual life, or okay, if I perform this particular act in this way, this is the way that it's done. If I'm jumping up and down in the kirtan, I might genuinely feel that level of ecstasy.
Very good question.
But so how do you know when it's
how do you know when you're being really sincere?
Yeah, well, no, not then. I was when is that genuine sincerity when does it arrive?
For us, sincerity is pleasing the spiritual master. If you know what the spiritual master, based on your association, what he wants, everything is in Prabhupada's books. he emphasizes certain things. You know, for students, what does he say? Cleanliness is next to godliness. He gives us such instructions like this. He tells us that a Brahmin cleans where he eats and where he sleeps. These things they're guiding you. They're meant to prompt your activities in such a way to develop sincerity. By following these little rules and regulations, without someone micromanaging your every move, the sincerity develops automatically. You don't have to. You see things that nobody has to tell you to pick up the piece of litter on the floor. You do it spontaneously. This is Krishna's house. This is Krishna's temple. This is the spiritual master's house. This is our public presentation. It shouldn't look like this. Whatever it is, if you see it, correct it. If you see a problem, take ownership. That's sincerity. You don't have to wait for the temple commander to come and say that, you know, someone left a pile of litter right where the public is going to see it. No, take care of it. You know, Krishna is seeing through your eyes, and he's waiting to see if you see these things. And the more sincere you are, the more you will see what to do to please Krishna. It's not that sincerity is just waiting around to be told what to do. But when you are told what to do, you do it with a sincere demeanor, not that, oh, in my mind, why is he telling me this? It's 9 o'clock at night. I want to go take rest. This temple commander is just a pain. Prabhupada gave that example in Vrindavan, very, very heavily. He came back after whatever it was, 6 months after the temple opening. And brand new temple. And yet, because there was a shortage of devotees, many devotees cannot stay in Vrindavan. It's too hot, it's too cold, it's too austere, it's too this, it's too that. And so there was only a skeleton crew. They couldn't keep people. They were making some devotees, but not many. Right? So when Prabhupada came back, he saw many things were not the way he left them. Things were broken. The deities weren't getting fresh flowers. Can you imagine? The deities were not getting fresh flowers. And so Prabhupada could understand what was going on. And he said, oh, you think the spiritual master has given you such a burden? Not just think, he said, this rascal spiritual master has given you such a great burden. Galagraha. Huh? Not Vigraha. See how he said?
Galagraha, that's what you said?
Galagraha, not Vigraha. Galagraha is something you want to, that's stuck in your throat that you want to spit out.
Oh my God.
The spiritual master has given us such a great burden, this rascal spiritual master. And people were sitting there silently, you could hear a pin drop. This broken, that broken. He said, in this way, the temple will simply become a go-down. A go-down in India is a filthy place where you throw unwanted things, a warehouse, a go-down. Simply become a go-down. And whatever money we get, at least let us eat. Yeah. Because he knows the mentality of the doors. Whatever money we get, the deity's not getting fresh flowers, everything is broken, but still you're eating. So we should never, ever think that the temple is a burden, that the spiritual master has simply given us someplace to trouble us. Yeah, at times it is what it is. This is broken, that's broken. Every day someone says, oh, Prabhu, this is leaking. Prabhu, this is, you know, it never ends. But this is a burden of love. It should be a burden of love. It should never be a burden that we think that the spiritual master has imposed on us, that it's like a punishment. And let me run away. Yes, that's there. The mind wants to give you an excuse to run away. Don't fall for the trap. Oh, I have to walk up so many flights of stairs every day. Oh, woe is me. Woe is me. You know? We should be thinking, with every step I take, I'm making spiritual advancement, getting that much closer to the ultimate perfection of life, going back home, back to Godhead. Right there, that's the stairway to Vaikuntha. Right? The stairway to Vaikuntha. Someone should write a song about that. But anyway, we're very fortunate. And the more you think you're fortunate, the more advancements you make. And my spiritual master has given me such a benediction that as he allowed me to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no greater fortune. How lucky am I? Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.